Okay, welcome to another episode of Cyber Oinks. Today we have Phil Aldridge. Phil is a director for Western Australia for this company called Fuse Technology, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically an MSSP, I would say, right?
Correct.
Is that correct? Yeah, cool.
Yep.
Phil has actually co-founded another MSSP in Hong Kong in the past and has been in this space for quite some time. You've also co-founded a couple of other projects, been quite entrepreneurial, quite active. So sure, this is going to be a fun discussion.
Yep.
We've chatted before this. So there's always stuff to talk about with you about cybersecurity. So I'm really excited to have you on today. How's your day?
Yeah, good, thanks. Looking forward to it. You can probably tell from the grey hairs that I've owned an MSSP for about 20 odd years. That's why. But all good.
Nice. Okay, so what we're doing today, just to remind everyone, is this thing I started called 12 questions for cyber experts. These are 12, I call them fundamental questions about cybersecurity. What I found interesting when talking to a lot of people in this space is there's a lot of different opinions. And I always say that I find it kind of, it's a bit funny that we have these hard opinions about cybersecurity, but they differ from other experts. And I always say, if this happened in physics, we'd be in quite the situation.
Yeah, not a good situation.
But that's why it's important to have conversations, right? That's why it's important. That's why I thought, I think this is, I want to get engaged with people, make sure these ideas are heard, that it's heard that there are these conflicting problems out there. And yeah, and so that's what the questions are aiming at. It's a bit cheeky, and I kind of want to put it, make sure we can actually answer them, because sometimes it's quite easy to dodge a question, let's say. So that's why I wanted to make sure it's a multiple choice type of a situation where it's either yes or no, or one of the options that are framed by the question. So please always pick one answer. It can be like 50-50 to 45, but you still, have to prioritize. That's what cybersecurity is about. You have to make a decision. And so that's why the questions are framed this way. And yeah.
So don't worry, I'm not a politician. I won't dodge the question.
That's good. Okay. So before we get into it, I have one warm-up question. That's sort of just test if you get the idea. So if you had to watch a game of lacrosse or a UFC fight, which one would you pick?
Or a US what fight?
UFC fight.
Why not a game of lacrosse?
A game of lacrosse? Why?
Yeah. One of my really good mates in Hong Kong used to play lacrosse for England when he was at high school.
Good.
Yeah, so that's probably why.
So to support him, basically. Yeah.
Plus, I've never seen one, so it'd be interesting to see what it's like.
Yeah. I hear they're quite long, but worth to sit one out, I guess.
Yeah.
So
that's what mobile phones are for, so they get you through there.
Cool. So we've tested, we've done the technical test. Let's get into the actual questions. First question is aimed at the topic of BYOD and managing devices. There's a lot of, this is one of those things that people are going to tell you different things, right? There's on the one side, it's culturally significant for companies to work with people that bring their own devices, whether it's contractors or just the company culture. On the other side, there's security risk. One traditional or effective way of addressing some of those, maybe managing devices. And so the question is, if you had to pick having a strong BYOD policy or an organization that has only managed devices, which one would you go for?
Only managed devices from a security perspective. So primarily for security. Obviously, it depends whether the organization can afford it. It depends on where everybody is. If you've got a staff who are dispersed all around the world, managed devices that the company owns, not necessarily practical. Having said that, with permissions from the staff, you can manage a BYOD. You can implement software to manage the device and then remove it later. Yeah,
cool. One thing that comes to mind is that a hurdle sometimes, do you think, implementing BYOD restriction? How is this accepted culturally from individually from your experience?
Look, I think depends on the industry you're in. If you're a heavily regulated industry, then you probably have to go down the managed device route. If you're not, and you're not dealing with a lot of private data, and you're not likely to get into trouble if something goes wrong, you can probably get away with BYOD. But it's the cost. A lot of companies can't afford the cost. I was chatting to a lady who has 150 contractors that work for her in the Philippines. If she had to implement managed devices for 150 staff, she'd go bankrupt because the price.
Yep. Absolutely. Another thing that comes to mind is, where do you think this is? What's the future? Let's say, would you say we're going to see more companies adopting this strategy, or do you think it's going to split between those that are regulated, those that are not? What do you reckon?
I think the technology will advance to the point where BYOD can be a completely managed device, and the separation of your work from your personal is much easier to manage from a technology perspective. So I'd expect the BYOD strategy to take over, but we're not there yet. We're kind of there with things like Intune on Android devices, as an example. You can really segment personal from business, which can be troublesome and annoying sometimes, but you can do it. Once that's really available for all devices, and it really works really well, then I think BYOD will probably take over, but not yet.
Right. Okay. All right. Second question. I asked quite a few now, but I was just curious to sort of explore the topic a bit.
Sure.
People, process, technology. That's the mantra. Everyone who's heard of cybersecurity will tell you. My question is, if you had to pick one, which one would you say organizations should focus on the most? I think this is a lot about the lack of focus, maybe, in the current state of things, or, what do you think deserves the most attention is really where I'm getting at with this.
This is an easy one. Out of the three, absolutely technology, because technology implemented correctly, there shouldn't be any mistakes. When you've got people involved and you've got processes with people involved, mistakes will be made. Doesn't matter how good you train somebody. Doesn't matter how good the process is. People will make mistakes. So a well-structured technology stack should potentially eliminate the mistakes. So yeah, technology would be the one I'd pick for sure.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. This is something that I think ties well to the answer you just gave. But sometimes, and this is something I've seen quite a few times, is clients expect their MSPs to take care of their cybersecurity. I think they're maybe sometimes mistakenly under the impression that, they're doing some security stuff there. There's a tool here and a tool there, right? And so they get the impression, okay, these guys are managing my security. But then in reality, the MSSP has a totally different expectation, right? Now, my question is, what do you think is the right way of doing this? It's not so much about, of course, there's a contract and everything's set in the contract, but what is the way forward in this? Should an MSSP be responsible for their client's security?
Absolutely. First of all, I totally agree with what you've said. Every client thinks an MSP is doing their cybersecurity. And whenever I meet somebody and they say that to me, my first question is, does your MSP know that they're supposed to be doing your cybersecurity? At least 9 times out of 10, the MSP doesn't know that and isn't contracted to do that. Now, I suppose MSPs should all be doing the cybersecurity for their clients, especially the small MSPs for small clients. If you go to a big organization, you have an IT department and you have a cybersecurity department, completely separate. Yeah. They're butting heads. That's the idea. One's an enabler and one's to stop things from happening. A lot of small businesses can't afford a good IT provider, let alone the addition of a good cybersecurity provider. Yeah. I would say that all MSPs should be MSSPs, the managed secure service provider. But we have a problem in that even the governments around the world don't really get this. The Australian Signals Directorate, if you look at their documentation on managed service providers, it all talks about managed service providers should do security. It doesn't even mention anywhere in the documentation the MSSP. So a lot of the time, my job is to educate people that their IT provider probably isn't doing their cybersecurity.
What do you think is behind this expectation? And is it what I said? Is it that there's a few things, like we do this one thing that looks like it's related to cybersecurity, and that gives the impression that that's why the client that doesn't understand, or what's the reason why there's such a mismatch in the expectations there?
Because technology is a broad word. So a client will see anything as technology, whether it be a mobile device, a laptop, come on. I remember the time when people used to call me and say, our fax machine is broken, can you fix it? I'm like, well, why would you think that we're contracted to fix the fax machine? It's nothing to do with the IT systems. But, same with phone systems. The expectation, if there's electric going through it, then everything associated with that should be handled by the IT provider. And that's just a misnomer. And clients, since I've been doing this, clients don't understand that.
Right. Yep. Going back to just cybersecurity, and I talked about priorities. I talked about the whole concept behind the questions. It's always about prioritizing and making decisions. If you had to pick prevention or response, one of them, which one would you say companies should master first and get right first?
Prevention. Absolutely.
Yep.
If you prevent something from happening. Yeah, no, it's interesting because the questions are quite black and white for me. I guess I've got to say.
Yeah, but that's good. But it just honestly, it's so interesting for me. I talk to people and it's just interesting how you have a very it's obvious. And by the way, on this one, I totally agree. It's my mind, it doesn't make sense to, but there's arguments that go for the other way, I guess, and people see these things differently. Yeah. I mean, so what's the reason? What's the reason why I think prevention is the thing that you should master first?
If you master prevention and nothing ever happens, you never have to respond. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have a response plan should something happen. But if you master the prevention, you should have a lot less issues. And hopefully you never have an issue. That's the logic behind that rule.
Absolutely. Okay. This is we kind of touched on this a bit because we talked about process, people, and technology, right? And a topic that's kind of close to this is education. There's a lot of businesses that are heavily focused on education. There's a lot of new tools coming out that are heavily focused on education. I think it's an interesting paradigm to see where things are moving technologically, and I think not so much from the cybersecurity perspective, but from the threat perspective, right? Like what's happening. There's a lot of new tech out there that can enable threat actors to come up with new smart ways of doing things. Yep. And so what I'm curious about is, again, we have cyber education and cybersecurity technology. Which do you think is the thing that we need to focus on to strengthen defenses of capabilities of organizations?
Now, I'm probably going to annoy a few of my friends when I answer this one because they are in the cyber education space. So let's see if I send this out to everybody, see what responses I get back from them. But I definitely with cyber technology. I think actually for the last 20, well, maybe not 20 years, let's say the last 10 years, we have been heavily focused on cyber education and teaching people what things are out there, teaching people how to mitigate from problems, what to do. But again, you're relying on people not to make mistakes. And, the threat actors get smarter and smarter at, making this a time issue, the urgency on the issue, or, they just they look at people's weaknesses. Humans make mistakes. They know that they're going to do that. If technology stops people making mistakes, people will still make the mistake, but the technology will stop anything from happening from that. That's my.
Yep. So let me ask you this: there's new threats coming out. There's new and also new tools and new ways to infiltrate the company's resources, for example, right? And I guess the question where I'm getting at with this is, there's going to be situations where the tech isn't prepared to take action against some new smart way of doing something, right? Malicious.
Yep.
Do you think that maybe education can be a defense factor somehow in those situations where the tech isn't ready yet?
If you can educate the masses quicker than the technology can be updated, it's never it's never an either-or situation. You know, you asked me to pick one, so I picked technology because I think that's the most important out of the two. But you need to educate as well. But I would say that, you know, educating a lot of people takes a lot of time. LinkedIn article or send out a video of something and everybody suddenly is educated and you're going to mitigate that risk. I don't think it works like that. So I think it's more a case of technology first with education second. And hopefully a combination of the two will stop everything, but it won't.
Yeah. By the way, you were saying that, you know, it's really like the prioritization thing, and it's the technology is first. By the way, I totally agree with you. I think it's hard to expect also that people will be able to respond better to something than the technology will. Right?
Yeah. It takes time to do stuff, but for somebody to understand the new threat landscape, to devise training, to deliver that training for everyone to do it, it's not a short process. So right. Probably the technology could possibly be implemented before the training's done.
Right.
But there's always a window. There's always a window of threat.
Yep. All right. Well, moving on. Ransomware.
Yep.
Big topic. Rising threat. Right. I think was it 6 or 7 years? 6-7 years. The percentage of successful attacks that led to breaches, ransomware has risen from around 1 or 2% or something like that to 24% last year of the total volume that's recorded. These are US statistics, but I would expect that this somewhat represents what's actually happening in other parts of the world as well. This Charlie Munger, who said, "Show me the motivation, I'll show you the result." Here, the motivation is money, right? Question is, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you ever want to look at really, really good customer service, if you want to see exceptional customer service, get yourself ransomware attacked and deal with the payment process, because they will speak every language, they will have every payment portal, every currency, and they're very polite and they're very nice.
The question is, with ransomware, you say it's more about innovating, finding new ways and new technological ways to battle ransomware, or would you say it's more about using the tech that we already have, supplying it better?
I would probably think it's around better use of the current technology. A well-organized cybersecurity defense for an organization should never have to worry about ransomware. You might get ransomware attacked. You might get your data locked up. But a very good, well-segmented backup strategy, you'll have a bit of downtime, but you've got all your data. You'll never have to pay the ransomware. You get rid of the threat actor, you restore your data, and you're back up and running again. And then not allowing stuff to happen and not allowing things to run on computers. That technology is already there. It's just that most people don't have it implemented or don't pay for it to be implemented. Let's put it that way. People will always click on links or always open up attachments. It's just human nature. Yeah. So the trick is to bypass the human. Well, that's why they're there.
Kind of supposed
to. Yeah. And you can't remove all the attachments. The world would stop if you did that. And you can't expect people to be 100% knowledgeable on, should I click this link or should I click that link? Should I open this file or should I open that file? Because mistakes will happen. Someone gets an email and it's supposed to be from the CEO and it's got a file attached and they don't open it because they think it's dangerous. And then they get, fired from their job because it was an important attachment they were supposed to open and do something with. I don't know, as an example. Yeah. Technology to eliminate or to reduce the risk and proper backups to mitigate from a ransomware attack.
Yep. Okay, I like this next one. In case of an event, should the organization pay or not?
Yeah. Don't sit on the fence. No, they should not.
Okay.
They shouldn't pay it. Okay?
Why?
I'm going to caveat that by saying, but it does depend on the situation. Yeah. As I said earlier, if you get ransomware attacked, but you've got really good backups, fine. if you get ransomware attacked and you go, our backups aren't really very strong, we're going to lose the last 30 days of data.
Right.
Business decision as to what to do. If you're going to lose everything, do you still have a business? So it's a risk reward scenario, I think. If I'm going to lose all my data and therefore I don't have a business anymore, then you might go, I'll try.
Might want to consider it.
Try and pay it, and hopefully they unlock your data for you. But they don't always do that. But reality is,
they can't, right?
This is where sort of prevention is better than response. Actually, great example of that. Yeah, it does a bit depend on the situation, but a lot of the time companies, if they really thought about it, they can go, well, we can probably recover a lot of data from emails that we've got or printouts that we've already made and an old backup, and we can probably get back to 95% of what we had over the next week or so. If they're trying to charge you, 20 Bitcoin or whatever it would be to recover your data, some companies can't afford the ransom.
Right.
So it does depend, but I think it's what have you lost and how much can you get back without paying?
Yep. By the way, one important thing to note here, I think, is when a company gets hit, they're actually more likely to be a target of another attack based on that, because they've already been proven to be a target that can have success. So,
yeah, absolutely. And very often you don't get rid of the threat actor from your system.
Right. Yeah.
They're hidden so deep that you can't get rid of them, or you don't get rid of them, and then they just come back again 6 months later and just do the same thing again to you. Right. And then the number of times that people haven't changed processes, haven't changed policy, are still with the same provider that possibly was responsible for the issue in the first place. Yep. It's quite spring. Oh, it happened to me once, it can't possibly happen again. Right. It's the same kind of argument as I'm so small it will never happen to me.
Yeah. Well, I think this one's actually even worse because it's actually more likely to happen to you because it happened to you before, right? So that's I think that's important for a lot of people to hear. I think to understand what's actually happening from the technological perspective, right? And to know that there's the threat actor is likely still there, and you don't know, right? And they just it's a ticking time bomb, and these are not good people, right? They're not like, okay, I've already got some money from this person, so I'm not going to do it again.
Yeah, but I'd also like to point out that last week the Australian federal government announced that they're implementing new legislation that for any business of any size, if you pay a ransomware, you are required to report it.
Okay.
Yeah, which is interesting. Now it's still it's based on a self-reporting. Yeah.
Right.
Get into trouble if you don't report.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
very interesting.
It's interesting to see how the government is going in terms of this. They want to find out what's really going on, because in Australia, businesses under $3 million turnover that aren't regulated don't have to report cyber attacks.
Right.
So the number of reported attacks is probably a fraction of the actual attacks.
Right. Yep. Yeah. That's absolutely the case everywhere.
Oh yeah.
At this point in time, for sure. When this happens, if and when this happens, who should bear the cost? Should it be the customer, or should it be the MSP that's serving the customer?
Okay. Again, look, I'd say it's interesting you say MSP. Yeah, I should say the MSSP should bear the cost, actually, and not the customer. That is caveated by as long as the customer has done everything that the MSSP has said they need to do.
Right.
Yeah, it's like for us at Fuse, we offer a guarantee of our services. If you get hacked under our watch, we remediate for free. We give you financial compensation for the hack. We're invested in the security of our clients, so I'm likely to say that we should bear the cost. Yeah, because we back it up ourselves. But I think if the client, if the MSP isn't supposed to be doing security for the client, then they can't be responsible for bearing the costs.
Yeah, right. So I think that's a really interesting thing. The thing that you spotted there is it comes back to the question we were talking about before, right? What is this organization actually doing? for us, right? Like what's the services that we're buying? What is the scope of what I'm supposed to expect as a client, basically, right? I think even for the MSSP, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on does that do what do you mean by the part if they do what they were supposed to? Is that because I think that has a lot that's a very it's related to the cyber education piece of things, right? The way they're supposed to behave. Like maybe sometimes it's about user behavior, doing things right, not clicking on some certain things and clicking on certain things. That's usually one of those things that part of an MSSP's service, right, is training users. But I guess, you know, it's also a sort of a gray area in the sense that, well, the fact that you haven't been trained doesn't mean that you can actually execute on the training 100% of the time, right? So did they do it or did they not do it? And those get kind of, but is that what you're talking about? Or is there other things that you sort of have
not
in mind
necessarily users' actions? I mean, we align all of our clients with federal government's cybersecurity framework for small businesses, which is called the Essential 8. And there's certain requirements in there that you're supposed to do, whether it be from backups to multi-factor authentication to controls around legacy devices, etc. So a lot of it we implement on the back end. So let's say, for example, managed devices. So for our cybersecurity guarantee, every device the client uses must be managed by us, no exceptions. So if they come back and they say, well, you know, the CEO doesn't want their device managed by you, then the guarantee isn't in place. And we would then not bear the cost if the attack came through the CEO. So it's a case of, you know, we say you need to do all of these things or allow us to implement all of these controls. And with all those controls in place, and if all your staff do the cybersecurity training that we send to you on a monthly basis, if all of that is done, then it's on us if you get an attack.
Right. Okay. Nice. Very good. Passwords, a very close topic for me. This next question, I'm gonna explain before why I'm asking the question. There are actually standards that are accepted in practice for systems that hold quite sensitive data, the US and other places that are based on NIST. They're talking about how to do password policy well. And what I find interesting is that there's actually standards that are conflicting in the way password policy is supposed to be implemented. Some standards say there needs to be a password policy where you rotate password every so often, right? With a defined time, basically, of how often you should do that. And then other standards say, well, you actually shouldn't do it. You should set a very strong password and just stick with that. I think the reasoning behind that is password resets are actually a vector of attack that can be used by threat actors. So I'm curious, what's your opinion on this? How often should passwords be reset?
Ideally, never.
Okay.
Certainly not every 30 days or every 90 days. If you force people to change passwords on a regular basis, they will change the last 2 digits of the password they have. So they'll change it from password 01 to password 02, which just makes it, if the threat actor knows what the first password is, it makes it much easier to guess the second password. So there's that side of it. So it's actually riskier to force people to change passwords. If you enforce password changing with complex passwords, people make their passwords easier so that they can actually remember them, which is also not good. So if you implement a password policy that is complex passwords or passphrases, preferably, where you don't require people to change it, but it's complicated, it might get hacked or it might get leaked or whatever, but then have a way of finding out that that's been leaked and change quickly. That's a much better solution than forcing everyone to change every 90 days. I think actually Microsoft now, it used to be that your security score was enhanced if you had password change policy in place. Now you're demoted points for having that in place. And the reality is we're moving towards a passwordless environment anyway. That's the current trend with the big players. Passwords are risky, therefore let's find a system without passwords.
Absolutely. By the way, thinking about the password reset risks, another aspect to this also is if you force users to make that change, it is harder for them to actually remember and manage and use it. And I think another aspect to it that's maybe not considered enough, I think, is that those users will then go ahead and use those passwords on other systems that are totally outside of the security domain of your system, right? They'll just need to do it because they can't remember these passwords, and it'll just come naturally. Like when they're setting up, people typically have hundreds of accounts these days, right? So they're bound to use the password at some point in time on another system that's, totally out of your control, and most likely you'll never find out, right?
Yep. You can't. There's no way to manage a system where people can't reuse passwords in other platforms. It doesn't happen.
Right.
You can't have, Amazon and LinkedIn passwords and make sure that you're not using the same password on both. You can't do that. I mean, I always think that people or organizations should probably invest in password managers, but probably to the point where they're giving it to the family of the employees as well, to the partner and the children for them to use. Because if you can get people to do things at home, they're more likely to do it in the office as well.
Right.
So if you're doing cybersecurity education and training, allow people to do it for their whole family, so that everybody in the family, a staff member who gets hacked at home and loses all the money in the bank account is not a very happy staff member in the office, or might need time off, or might need some mental well-being assistance, and that's also detrimental to the organization. So
absolutely,
help the family.
I like that. That's very, very good. I like that. It's very nice. We just talked about it, but I guess this comes back to this whole topic of liability and responsibility over what's actually happened. When a user does that, when a user reuses their password that's for the domain account or whatever, they use it for one of their services they use, that ends up being basically the way access is compromised. How's that fall here?
I don't think you can pin it on the employee. Not really. And also, it's not really the organization's responsible or fault, because they can't actually do anything about it. You can have password policies in place in an organization, written down documents that people are supposed to follow. Probably from a legal perspective, maybe the employees would be responsible, but ethically, morally, should an organization hold an employee responsible for putting a password into some application that got hacked that was the same as their email password? I think that's a dangerous ground, really is. Just say to people they should subscribe to some sort of dark web reporting solution. They're very cheap. And then as soon as one of your accounts with a password hits the dark web, you get an alert. And as soon as you get an alert, you go to that staff, recognize this password, change it. Change it on every platform that you're using that password for. It's about the best you can do, and certainly a lot cheaper than potentially trying to take an employee to some sort of tribunal for doing something wrong.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, last two questions. These are more about trends. The first one is zero trust architecture. Do you see this as something that's more of a buzzword, or do you see it as a fundamental strategy going forward for cybersecurity?
Certainly a buzzword. If you jump on any security training at the moment, they're talking about zero trust architecture. Surprised no one sort of called it to ZTA or whatever it is. That should be the way to go, I suppose. It's probably a progression. It's probably the next step in the evolution of cybersecurity defense. I think we have to the threat actors are developing extremely quickly, and cybersecurity defense needs to try and keep up. And this is probably the next evolution of that. Making sure that we make sure that the person is the person, make sure that the app is the app, make sure the device is the device, the location is correct, making sure that their session is renewed on a regular basis and things are logged out if it's not being used. All of these things that sort of build up for the zero trust architecture, yes, it all needs to be done, and it all is probably the way forward, but it won't stop there. Because the threat actors will get past that. They'll find a way of bypassing zero trust architecture to do something bad. So the process will evolve.
I'm really curious about this one thing that's associated with the topic of zero trust architecture and just the whole concept around cybersecurity strategy. It's BYOD and device management and how that ties into zero trust architecture, because the whole idea is it's a networking security concept first of all, right? The whole idea is about access, really, right? Access to resources, and it's about how do we treat quests? How do we treat, you talked about sessions and stuff like that. And my question is, how does this tie into what we were talking about before? BYOD and the managed devices questions, the situation there being what it is, and the threats there being what they are. How do you think these two things tie together? What do you think is connection there?
So I guess the device itself. Yeah, sorry.
So I was just going to say, because what I'm getting at here is there's a bit of a conflict there as well, right? Like it's a no trust. Then on the other hand, if you're managing devices, that is sort of saying, okay, well, there is something that on this other side that I'm trusting here, right? Or that I'm using, and I'm trusting that it's reliable and all that. So okay.
So look, the zero trust architecture is a combination of, I don't know how many things, 5, 6 things it is, of which the device is one of them. Yeah. Now, as I mentioned, I think in the first question, the ability to manage a BYOD is already available. You need the employee's permission. Yeah. But there's no reason why BYOD device cannot be part of a zero trust architecture. It's kind of hard to achieve, to be honest. A lot of organizations don't really have the ability to implement full zero trust architecture. You might do bits and pieces of it to try and get towards nirvana, but actually it's not that easy to achieve. Having said that, you can do the people, you can do the sessions and the apps, you can do the micro segmentation of data, you can do the just enough access, so not giving people more access than they need. You can do the majority of it. The device itself, you can do the location, obviously, but the device itself, I think with a quite simple technology, you can manage the device to a certain point that it can be included in a full zero trust architecture strategy.
Okay. The last question out of the 12 questions is AI. It's about AI. What do you think is AI in your mind more of an enabler for cybersecurity and the future of cyber tech, or is it more of an enabler for threat actors?
I give talks on this to people, primarily to a room full of lawyers, which is quite good fun. And I pretty much only talk about the risks of AI. Not, everybody else wants to talk about the benefits of AI because they want to sell AI solutions to their clients. And I pretty much go on the risk and the governance and compliance aspects of AI. When it comes to cybersecurity, it's an enabler for the threat actors, primarily. It allows them to do things quicker, better, and more cost effective. The flip side of that is that people developing cybersecurity defense strategies can use AI to protect quicker and to protect better. But it's probably going to cost more. So I see it mainly in this space, in the cybersecurity space, I mainly see it as a risk, because anybody can jump on to a development machine and build some bots and do some stuff with AI and whatever it might be. It's lowered the barrier to entry. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
So people can get involved very, very quickly now. As always, we're playing catch up. The problem is now that the people doing the bad stuff, they're running faster.
Moving faster.
So we have to run faster behind them.
Right. Yep. I think another aspect to this also is the fact that AI modeling is all about data. It's if we sort of a simple to imagine example is deepfakes, and the ability to generate images, using that to an advantage of a threat actor, and sort of thinking about where that's heading, right? Like what's the, we're thinking about AI and I on the side of, okay, so we're generating this this fake imagery. On the other side, you may say, well, there's going to be AI that's detecting. And that's actually, there's a lot of effort being put into this so that you can actually recognize this has been an AI generated image. I guess what's sort of the end state of this, and where is this moving, right? At some point, you're going to have images that are unrecognizable from a real image. It's because on the internet everything's copy. It's all data that's just the same. Like if I take a picture of us talking now, if you look at it and I look at it, it's the same. It's the exact same data, right? We're not looking at two different. And so that's sort of an aspect there. And then, it's easy to imagine when you're talking about images, but this really stands for any other type of activity that is sort of, whether it's user behavior or network behavior or anything of that sort, you're going to have this, you're always going to have this problem present, I think.
Yep. Look, we're getting into the realms of ethical AI now. Yeah. What's right and what's wrong. Anything that you use AI for good purposes can be used for bad purposes. So the better AI gets, the more people can use it for bad situations. And I'll give you a good example of this, because I saw it on TV on an advert the other day. So Google brought out their new phone, great phone, great features. And one of the features which they showed in the advert was the ability to take multiple photos at the same time, and then if someone's looking away or blinking, because it's taken so many shots all at the same time, it will make sure that it has a final photo where everyone's looking at the camera and not blinking when the photo was taken. Now, that photo that you're then looking at never existed.
Yep.
Okay? So it's an AI photo. It's fake.
Yep.
So everyone goes, that's a really, really good feature. It's great. But the photo never existed. It's not real. It's AI generated. So where does it stop? Where do we go? It's okay to use AI for this purpose, but it's not okay to use it for this purpose.
Right.
Yeah? It's, I know the governments around the world are looking at ethical AI regulations and looking to put in policies in place for it. The reality of that is not everyone around the world is going to follow those rules.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter what regulation you put in place, people won't follow it if they don't want to. And there's always somebody that deliberately doesn't want to follow it. Who are the people we need to worry about? And I just think, I don't know quite what the end game is here, but it's a risky situation we've got when we are actively generating fake, real stuff.
Right.
I'm not comfortable with that at all. Yeah.
Right.
If someone's blinking in a photo or looking away or picking their nose or whatever, so be it. That's the way a photo should be. Yeah. That's where I stand.
All right. Thank you. So before we wrap up, I do want to ask you one last question that's not a multiple choice.
Okay.
If you could give a piece of advice to small to medium businesses about help them prioritize what they should do to be better protected and to do cybersecurity better, what would it be?
Okay. So first of all, I'll say what not to worry about. When I talk to people, small business owners, about cybersecurity, they go, don't worry, my website is all secure. It's all good. And I sort of say, but that's not where the risk is. Pretty much all the risk is with an email. So secure your email. Make sure you've got a good password. Make sure you've got multi-factor authentication on your email. Make sure your email system has been secured for you by someone who knows what they're doing. But pretty much, I would say, probably the best one is ask your current IT provider if they do your cybersecurity. If that's the one thing everybody at the end of this does, they just go and say, I don't know, I'll go and ask.
Right. That's a very good one, actually.
Slide number one of my presentation. One of my presentation. If you're not 110% sure that your IT provider is doing your cybersecurity, you should assume they are not doing it.
Right.
So go and find out.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much, Phil.
No problem.
Thanks for joining today. It was a great conversation. I look forward to having other discussions in the future. We're going to be doing other topics. If you're interested, we can always jump on another one of these in the future. For everyone listening, tune in for more discussions we're going to have with cyber experts. We're going to be talking about these fundamental questions. And if you have any ideas that you would like for me to ask people, please shoot them my way. And Phil, thanks again, and see you later.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me. Bye-bye.